All right, let's do it.
Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone. It's episode 78 with coach and speaker Ashton Cantou. Did you just say? Yes. Thank you, first of all, for taking the time to do this. We're 12 hours apart, so I appreciate it big time.
It helps me out a lot figuring out those numbers. So I appreciate you. But yeah, I'm very thankful to just be able to serve your people and see how I can contribute today.
Yes. Straight off the bat, could you describe the way that you view yourself for us as a woman and or human?
Sure. That's deep. You just went straight in, didn't you? As a human, I guess what I try to embody is love, acceptance, and gratitude. It's taken me a lot of time to get there, a lot of work to get there, but that's kind of my check-in for myself as a woman, as a human, as a soul. I'm like, am I in gratitude? Am I embodying acceptance, and happiness, joy, love?
That's powerful. That's a good statement.
Those are the top priorities, for sure.
Let's, I guess, dive into childhood, seeing as your story starts a little later in the adolescent years. You comfortable walking us through that?
Yeah. Great parents. I had the normal middle-class childhood. I did struggle a lot. I had anxiety. So I know there are parents out there probably even listening that have kids right now that have ADD, right? Or diagnosed ADD or anxiety, or just have fits and things like that. And I struggled all the way from early on. My first grade teacher told my parents I would never make it to college, to gear me towards vocational school. So that seed was planted that I kind of was, always going to have a hard time since I was little. So we don't realize that these seeds get planted, and those first 5 years are so imperative, and they start imprinting on our subconscious. So I think from a very young age, I kind of had this belief system about myself that I really wasn't like everybody else, that I was always going to struggle, that life was going to be hard for me. And so it was, and my dad always said, I learned through the school of hard knocks, that I learned the hard way. And once again, just imprinting on my subconscious mind. So by the time I was a teenager, because I had good upbringing in the sense of values and work hard and do those things, I was doing well. I was class president. I was team captain. I had, A, B honor roll. And then, when my parents divorced, they weren't too good together. Let's just say that they were great models separately, but together they just shouldn't have been together. They weren't the right fit. And that can cause, toxicity, right? So I also witnessed a lot of that. And by the age of 16 or 17, I moved from class president and team captain once they split into moving myself into rehab. I became super rebellious. I did not know how to cope with my anxiety. I did not know how to cope with my panic attacks. I was angry, and drugs were my escape. And like I told you, I was just really thankful that I never had addiction to drug or alcohol. I was a serious abuser. I was a limit pusher, and I nearly OD'd several times. I was taken to the hospital several times. But it was also something that I was like, okay, if I don't feel like doing this, I could put it down, and I did. And just, like I said, very thankful for that. But it all stems, I think, from this deep sense of feeling unworthy, not feeling good enough. And I didn't know that then. I didn't know that I wasn't respecting myself and wasn't treating my body well, and was having self-harm and self-sabotage behaviors because I didn't love myself. I didn't know that. I just did whatever I could to not feel, right? Because as an empath, as somebody who feels things very deeply, that stuff was just heavy. And I was taking on a lot of my parents' stuff that wasn't mine. And yeah, man, it got pretty messy. I was in fights. I was just a mess. I was an absolute wheels off hot mess. Well, you wouldn't know it. I wore a lot of masks, right? So I would, I kept it together on the outside. I kind of lived this underground wild child life until I started getting in trouble. And otherwise still was pulling the grades, still was Miss Independent, looking pretty on the outside. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. I had pretty cool, I thought.
So being been a kid who was, I guess, imprinted with that belief that you're always going to struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and then being told by your dad as well that you had to learn from the school of hard knocks,
Mm-hmm.
getting to that place, I guess, in those teenage years where you're now class president, team captain, you're doing well. What brought on that feeling of not being good enough?
I think part of it had to deal with uh, my parents didn't decide on custody, and
Okay.
I was kind of like a little bit of a ping pong ball at that time. There was, um, if they couldn't handle me, it was like, well, you take her, right? Well, you take her. So there's this little bit of just like kind of discard. But I think even deeper than that, it was my inability to actually cope with emotions. Like I did not have the emotional regulation or emotional intelligence, and I really was suffering from severe panic attacks and anxiety. So I think underlying was the unworthiness, but I don't think it was conscious. I don't think that was like the conscious decision. It wasn't like I was feeling bad about myself, so I went and did these things. It was like I couldn't cope with life.
Okay. How did like anxiety and the panic attacks manifest for you? Because I know a lot of people, when they first come across a panic attack, they think they're dying.
Yeah.
How did you experience that?
Well, I would have outbursts. I would have like actual like panic, like screaming, crying, sometimes cussing, throwing things like outbursts. Or I would think that I was having like an asthma attack, right? I mean, they diagnosed me with like sports induced asthma. I didn't have asthma.
What?
I
Never
didn't
heard
have,
of that before.
no, not even thing. I didn't have asthma. I was having anxiety attacks. I was having panic attacks. But for me, it my emotions came to the surface in these panic attacks, in these moments of panic. Like they were legit panic.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of like that, the breakdown of your parents' relationship,
Mm-hmm.
obviously it would be hard to see at the time, especially being so young, but with all the self development, self work you've done, looking back, do you understand like just how that impacted you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I'm so actually so grateful now, right? They're both happily married now. Um, and I've seen good models of relationships. So I have more seeds of gratitude than anything. Um, it jacked me up too in the sense that I blamed myself as well because really what their core arguments were around parenting. So I think I felt this sense of responsibility that I took on. So I've had the chance to relieve myself of that, which is nice.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's especially for young kids or young teens who are going
Mm,
through that sort of divorce. When they lose their parents, they don't understand why because they aren't told the
right.
complete truth. They have to make a story up
Yeah,
about why it's
exactly.
happened, and usually it's easier to say I'm the reason than to look outward and blame someone else.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, and totally undeserved too.
Mm, absolutely.
um, I guess moving on from there, are you like happy walking us through the rest of your story?
Yeah. So like I said, it got worse before it got better. As you're making these decisions, and they're impacting your family, right? So it seems like you're very selfish when really you're not selfish. You just don't love yourself. You're not even aware of others because you're not aware of yourself. You're kind of just walking blind, right? So although in other people's eyes, like my family, my friends, like it just seemed like I was kind of reckless and didn't care about other people. The truth was I didn't care about myself. So it impacted my relationships with my family and the way they viewed me. And it really it made me feel awful about who I was. I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, um, and I didn't hold a lot of mercy or forgiveness for myself. So I beat myself up a lot, right? And then I held then in like to overcompensate for the poor decisions I had made early on in life. Um, I really held like a unrealistic expectation standards for myself of like perfectionism and things, and I just couldn't even live up to it. And it was like I would take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. In college, the drugs went away, then I started drinking and I just still hadn't dealt with anything. So this like the monsters would basically come out, right? Or I would just drink to the point of blacking out, and I landed myself in jail for it. I mean, I even, and then I would get even further along. Like I would be like, okay, like I go to counseling, I get in church, I would get on track, and I made it through college. Okay, and then I finally got into my big girl job, and I'm teaching, and I'm going to grad school. I got a 3.9 GPA in grad school. I'm modeling. I'm waiting tables. Like, got this great apartment, boyfriend, thinking that I'm like, I'm good. I'm doing good. And um, one night I got slipped. It's called ketamine. It's like a horse tranquilizer. It's supposed to knock you out, but it did not do that to me. It actually had like severe adverse reaction, which causes muscular rigidity and gives you superhuman strength. So that night was really traumatic. I'm thankful that I did not end up raped, although in that police report it looked like that way might have been what was the next step if I had not approached an officer. But because I was so belligerent, couldn't speak, couldn't function, I was actually taken. So from that was super traumatic because it was the first time that I had actually landed myself in that situation and not known why. Right. And I had cuts all over my wrist, like bruises everywhere. And I just didn't know what had happened. It was really scary. And there I am at this high point, right? And it's like the higher you get, the further the fall. And from that space, like my boyfriend and I broke up, and I just wanted to run. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with me. I'm done with all this. Like, I'm out of here. And I convinced this new guy of like 2 months of dating, who treated me amazing in the beginning, right? He flowered me with all the gifts, gave me all the love and attention that I couldn't give myself at the time. So it's like all that external validation. Yes, yes, yes. And get him to go out to Texas, and bless his heart, man. He was just as torn up as I was. Like, you attract who you are, not what you want, right? And not that I was who he was, but he had the level of wounding that I had. He was actually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but like in retrospect, I'm not so sure. Like I've said, he may have just had a lot of his own trauma and a lot of his own wounding that he, was taking his pain and outwardly and misdirecting that, right? But either way, toxic. Together toxic, and it got bad. He picked me up at one point by my throat, choke slammed me, threw me into the bathtub. We'd been drinking, and I just was like, well, that's my fault. I engaged. It's alcohol, and I kind of dismissed it, and it got worse, and it got worse. And one day he told me, he said, I'm on my way home. You're about to see the meanest mother effer you've ever seen in your entire life, and I'm going to tie your dog to the shit post to die. I was like, oh, I'm like, well, I feel like I've already seen that guy. Like, I don't want to deal with that. And granted, I live out in Texas now. I'm not in Indiana with my family. I don't have a job yet. And it was scary, but I had what transpired from this point on in my life has been pretty incredible. When I decided to show up for myself, pack up my stuff, grab my dog, be in my car, it was like miracles. Boom, boom, boom. I just became a magnet for miracles. And yeah, it's not been linear. The healing's not been linear, but it's definitely been kind of like this, like upward spiral a little bit, and then a little bit down, a little bit up. But for the most part, from that initial decision of like, I matter, my life matters, I deserve better. Like I feel like God, the universe, whatever aligns for you, like matched that belief. And experiences and opportunities kind of started coming in, and then my faith was just locked in, like you couldn't break it.
Talking about like that tension within the family, and then I don't know, if I can't remember if you said you had no mercy for yourself or your family didn't, but you said you sort of didn't really fit in with your family at the point where you're going off the rails. Because of that, were you able to talk to anyone about what you were going through?
My mom's been she's merciful. Like she's very forgiving, very merciful. My dad's been tougher. He's been tougher to break and to get to realize, especially like because he's more black and white and she's more fluid. But yeah, you know what? I've actually got great relationships with both my parents by doing the inner work myself, by forgiving myself, by just continuing to like step into the highest version of me. I think they've been able to witness my growth, and I've realized that peace starts with me. When I changed how I viewed them, the way they showed up changed too. So it just all the work that I've done, they haven't had to do any of the work, and it's healed the relationships. And that started as soon as I started showing up for myself and doing the inner work. Everything started healing with us too. So it's actually been really beautiful, the way it's healed everything.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In terms of nearly like getting yourself in that position where you're slipped ketamine, waking up not knowing why, what's going through your mind like at the point where you come to that realization, holy shit, I was nearly raped? Does something click and you think I need to change something drastically?
Not yet, not there. At that point, you would think, right? You would think after all these things, you would wake up. I just was not waking up, man. I wasn't, because for me, those type of situations just dug me into a deeper downward spiral because they just made me feel worse about myself. Instead of being like, oh man, I need to wait. I was like, man, I'm a piece of shit. Like, I deserve this. Like, this is basic. My parents were right. Like, this is who I am. I'm an F up, you know? So my belief systems kept me there. And in fact, they dug me deeper.
Yep. This is a selfish question because it's something I've been through myself. In terms of like that self-hate, I hated myself for being a cheater, and the same thing, not feeling good enough. And so I would drink to escape the self-hatred, which would then make me do more of the same stuff. So I kept myself in a cycle.
Oh,
was it the same for you?
I got to the point where, oh my gosh, I got to the point I where I didn't know how much I hated myself until I drank, and then self-harm kicked in.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, like I got to the point where like I subconsciously wanted to take my life, but I didn't know that. Like walking on my daily, I didn't feel depressed or suicidal like that. But man, drinking enough will shut down your conscious mind completely, and the truth will emerge, right, of what you actually believe. And it showed up. It manifested in my behaviors.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't mean this to sound rude at all, but because you are good looking, you were the like team captain. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Class president. Because like you had this outward success and you are good looking. I'm assuming like external validation came with that. Was there any, I guess, like butting of heads between you and that validation externally?
Can you maybe break that down for me? What do you mean by that?
Like in terms of, because I know if someone was to show me love, show me gratitude, and I didn't love myself, I hated myself, there'd be this resistance to accept any sort of validation.
Yeah, I actually really struggled with that. I was engaged to be married, I'm not, but I actually really struggled to even receive that. In fact, like that was one of the hardest things, because until you love yourself, it's really hard to accept that. I was before that, even though like before that, just so disconnected to myself. There wasn't even resistance to it because I was almost oblivious to it. Right? I was almost just like not needing it because I was so disconnected to me. I was so disconnected to others.
Yep.
So it was kind of like just bounced off me almost. It wasn't even resistance. It just I didn't care either way.
Wow. That's
I didn't really care about
self-loathing.
The only people I really cared about were people that I knew that were suffering, because everybody else was like, you don't get me, you can't relate. So a lot has shifted. Love all the people. Grateful for all the people now.
In terms of you, like when you get to that point where you finally break up with your partner, where you're from, and then you decide that you're going to run away with this guy you've been with for 2 months, what's going through your head at that point? Why do you, looking back now, do you understand why you had this need to run away?
I can tell you what was going through my head because of what was going on in my gut. So right before, this was like some of the biggest lessons I've actually learned here are to listen to my intuition. And I can tell you, before we had packed everything up in moving trucks and we were shipping everything. We were just going to take his car, and we were in the garage, and I remember he'd been mean to other people, but he had been real nice to me. And I never really heard him make any comments to me before until this moment where I literally spewed all over the outside of the garage. I pulled the side door out, and I got so sick right before I was about to get in the car. And I knew, in my mind, I'm like, something's not, this is like my gut screaming, like, don't do this. This is not a good idea. So in my head, in that moment, I was at odds with myself, because my higher self, my intuition, I knew that I was making a really bad choice. I knew that I was running. I knew that I knew it was dangerous. Like, I didn't know why I knew, but I knew. And he said, "Well, what's wrong with you now?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh." But at that point, I was already all in. I had a lot of pride, which is why I also didn't move home after all that happened. Why I ended up working 7 days a week, for peanuts. I was poor. Didn't even get my nails done, which was a big shift for me, right? Like, coming from doing whatever I want here in Indianapolis, and then um, I'm like living in a neighborhood where if I take my trash out, they're like, "Hey, girl, you want some Skittles? Skittles were drugs." I'm like, "No, I'm good." Right? So I knew in my mind at that point in time, because your mind and your heart and your gut, they're all connected, right? That gut brain axis, like, there's a reason you actually feel things in your stomach when they're not right. So big
Yeah,
lesson.
the more you listen to that, it's just like a muscle. Like the more you
Yeah,
exercise it, the stronger it's going to become, and the better you're
right.
going to be able to use it.
Right. I always say that everybody has intuition, but it's only as loud as our willingness to listen, right? So a lot of people pray all the time. They want answers. They're like, help me, right? But how often do we sit aside in nature or in meditation and actually get quiet and still to listen to those answers, to have that inspired insight, that wisdom, to actually, to have the downloads so we can get the answers? Like, it's been a game changer for me.
That's a good quote too. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, share it.
um, in terms of, now I don't want this to come across rude either, but you talked about your
I
parents'
don't take it
relationship.
personal or offense.
um,
For agreements, don't take anything personal.
you spoke about your parents' relationship being um, toxic. Were there any similarities like between that relationship and the one you got yourself into going to Texas?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I carried out all their patterns. I mean, all of us do, but much of the work I've done is unlearning, right? Is unlearning some of the self worth stuff that I picked up from my mom, anxiety, uh, the rigidness, the judgment, the criticism, the harsh self judgment from my dad. So much of my inner thought systems were actually working against me. Now, that's not to say that they don't have amazing qualities that I'm like, yes, like, I want to keep these things, because they do, they really do. But I think from lineage, it's not even their fault, right? I think from lineage, grandparents, great grandparents, some of these ineffective behaviors were passed down. So I just had absolutely, to answer your question, absolutely, so much was carried over. And it's still a shedding process. There's still things that when I'm with them, they mirror up to me, and I'm like, oh, might want to take that layer off, right? Like, we'll leave that one here. Love you. Move
Um,
on.
in terms of like you getting to that point where you're now in Texas and you're now going through this abusive relationship, the first time I guess you get physically abused, what's going through your head and what made you stay?
Um, I was blaming myself, right? I took responsibility, um, which I had a tendency to do. A lot of self blame. I said, we were both drinking. I was arguing with him. I was mouthing off or whatever. And I just was like, I blamed it on alcohol, and I blamed it on myself, basically.
Wow. Um, was was there any, I guess, Was there any thought, like looking back now, it's easier to see, but do you think there was any hint of you staying in a relationship because your parents had divorced?
I think that's why I stayed with my fiance. I think I was definitely settling, and I was not willing to accept that that was it because I was afraid to be, that couple. Not with him though. I think at that point I was just in so deep. I didn't have a job. Like I couldn't see my way out right at that point. I really didn't have that level of awareness. I was like head underwater. Mm.
Okay. I guess for anyone who's in an abusive relationship who feels like they deserve whatever's happening to them, do you have any advice for someone going through that?
Yeah, I would reach out. I mean, at this point, like what my biggest issue was back then was I had what's like called lone wolf or lone ranger syndrome, and it was really detrimental. Right, I didn't tell people what was going on. Like I would talk to somebody because the second you open up, A, you're going to start healing. B, you're going to have an outside perspective that is going to hopefully help you to shift that paradigm or belief system, or you'll realize that you have another safe place to go. Right. But I would reach out to someone like me who's been there and has made their way out, find a safe home, like do whatever you have to do to show up for yourself the way you would your own best friend.
Yeah, and this is totally random, but I just seen the New Zealand Prime Minister. She um, put through a bill that, like any people going through a domestic relationship, they can give you another bank account, like separate money, and they
Yeah,
can pay you to get out of whatever relationship you're in.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare to try to separate all that out. So that's awesome.
um, I guess like moving on to how you've processed, overcome, or dealt with all of that. You spoke about
Mm-hmm.
you wearing these masks throughout that
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of, obviously you'd know now, but what sort of masks were you wearing? Or what have
Miss,
you
Inde-
relinquished?
Miss Independent. I've got this. Like the strong one.
Yeah.
Don't worry about me. I got this. I got this. I'm drowning. I'm working 7 days a week. I am in severe pain, like internally, but I'm okay. Like, how you doing? I'm good. How you doing? Like, throw the smile on. So that was a massive one. No vulnerability, like zero transparency, zero connection. Um, in my professional sense, like people would tell me, like, you are super professional. I was very just like no play. Like don't small talk me and ask me about my weekend. You don't need to know what I'm doing on my weekend. Like I was really, really closed. Um, the fun one, right? I was still trying to like be the life, which I am, but that's not a mask. It's a different life when it's coming from your light versus it's coming from insecurity, right? So it's just different. Um, but yeah, mostly those strong, independent, which I think are all okay in their own sense, but they become a mask when they're covering up what's really going on,
Yeah.
right? Like it's okay to be strong when you're actually feeling strong. It's okay to be independent when you're actually in a space of independence. But when you're feeling like you need to be connected and that you need support, but you're acting like you're independent, that's a mask.
Do you feel like you had those masks you talk about, like feeling you needed to be connected? Was it easier to have those masks and act that way than to try and fail in terms of connection?
Um, I didn't know that I was wearing the masks until I started doing the work and, working with coaches and had Alexi Panos and some other just boss coaches just rip them off basically. Like I just some of my false identities just got demolished basically, and so I didn't really get the opportunity to know like was it easier or not because I didn't have the self awareness to know I was wearing them.
What is that process like, having those masks demolished? Because obviously those masks, if we wear them for long enough, they become part of our identity, and it's hard relinquishing that.
Yeah, I think lucky for me. I've been able to intellectualize a lot of these concepts about like masks, identity, and them being false before I'd actually had to do the integration portion. So like I'm like I can get with that. I understand that, on a conceptual level. I know that yeah, you're probably right. That could be a false identity because I think deep down, for me being in it like very intuitive, I actually knew that that wasn't me. I actually knew that it was a hard exterior that I was wearing. I didn't know that it was visible to everybody else was the problem. I thought I knew maybe, but I didn't think people could see me like that. And conscious people can. They can totally see straight through you. So it was rough. It definitely felt like parts of you were dying. Like a little bit of grieving.
That makes
Some
me
of
cringe.
yeah, you kind of grieve yourself. You're like, well, I thought I was this, but I'm not really this. And I'm still shedding parts of me that aren't really me. Like even things like some women go when they start this work, they get to the point where they feel completely most comfortable in their own skin. I still love makeup. So sometimes I even grapple with, well, is that a mask of the pretty one still, or is this just something that I truly aesthetically like and I do for me because I enjoy it? So like there's still even times where you have to really check in with yourself and see why you're doing, like what's the intention behind what you're doing. And I think the best way to know if I'm still in my authentic self versus wearing masks is, am I operating from fear or am I operating from love, and am I aligned with my core values or not? So those are a couple little tests that I kind of like
It's
check in
powerful.
on.
And I'm going through the same at the moment. I think I've built like a reputation in this city as someone who's very vulnerable, and so like all my talks are really raw. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm questioning just how much I'm opening up, and it's like, are
Mm.
you really doing this because you want to help people, or because you know it's going to get you more love, appreciation, and attention? And so I'm battling with that at the moment, so I can understand that.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you need a battle with that. I think it's probably a little bit of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's okay. I think because that's like a full circle, right? So there's a little bit of ego in there that yes, but without that little bit of ego, you're not going to actually have the ambition or drive to bring this service to the people. So it's kind of like it's your vehicle. So it's okay, because it's your vehicle that's delivering the service. So
Oh,
without that, you wouldn't have the service,
thank you.
which is your driving factor, right? So it's
Yeah,
really just checking, well, what's my why?
that's
And I
powerful.
think you know your why.
um, moving on, we spoke a little bit earlier about some of the modalities that you use, and you spoke about somatic work and breath work.
Mhm.
Can you like walk us through those and how they've helped you?
Yeah. Well, I actually just started with like fundamental spiritual principles, right? So forgiveness was like the number one medicine for myself, for my family. Um, Listening to my still small voice, intuition. Those were really big foundations for me. And then, like just these are just principles that I've been operating from, like looking at failure as feedback. Like that was it. Then these were the foundation before I started the other work. I started understanding these fundamental truths, like failure is feedback, um, forgiveness is the medicine. Uh, what is it? Like having the power of a vision. Creating a vision was something that actually really helped me because it allowed me to release the past and start deciding for something different, right? Listening to my intuition, so meditation, prayer. I knew from the get, for me, especially because of the way things were starting to just piece together in front of me, I could see something bigger at play. I could see something working without me moving. And it got a little eerie sometimes because some really crazy pieces moved, and including getting me into this work. You know, it was insane. So knowing that I had to rely on a higher power. Those were some of the fundamentals. And that foundation of that faith and these understandings kind of started leading me to deeper modalities because I would take a few steps forward and then I would hit a roadblock. It wasn't like these deep mudslides that I used to have, but I would come up against a trauma or a wound. And I'm like, well, you can't intellectualize that. You can't think your way out of those things, right? And forgiveness is a great, great medicine, but it only goes so deep. It doesn't help the trauma in your body. So somatic, like in breath work, breath work has helped tremendously with the anxiety. I just do a little bit every day. Tony Robbins has videos on YouTube. You can check it out. But there's also workshops and stuff if you want to go a lot deeper with that. It just depends on how far you are in your healing journey. Acupuncture for the trauma, for the when I say trauma, a lot of it was self-induced, right? But it's still traumatic, and it was still traumatic. It still messed me up on a cellular level. Like I would shake when I would see policemen. I was terrified of cops. Every time I would drive, I would freeze. Like I didn't, it was actually a really rough experience with them, more so anything that came out of that drug. So little PTSD around that. So I really started exploring some ways to start releasing the trauma. And see, what else did I do? Breath work, acupuncture. Oh, I've done Reiki, energy healing has been a big one. I just actually went to a retreat out in Bali, a leadership retreat. It was amazing, but truthfully, one of the best things I did out there was I went to like a private water temple and rebaptized myself, and I did some energy healing and meditation, and I just had a massive purge of emotion and a release of some things that I've been carrying. And you just don't know, right? Like the healing comes in waves. So it's about clearing space for more in your life. When you're still holding these trapped emotions in your body, you carry them into future endeavors and relationships, and it's just not worth it, because you want to have a clean slate in your new space. So it's, for me, been really worth shedding some of these underlying, like, low vibrational feeling tones that I don't even realize I carry, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. You don't know you're carrying it until you're triggered, and then you're like, oh, there's still a charge there. If there's still a charge, you're not healed. If someone brings up the situation and you still get a charge, it's not healed. If you face off with somebody and you think that you forgave them, but it's still like you feel a little shock, you're not healed. So that means that there's still some healing work to do in whichever modality you choose. You know, certain people like certain things. They find what works for them. There's like tapping is a great one. There's a few others that are really great. Like hypnotizing is a great way to rewire your subconscious, kind of release some past traumas. So you got to find what works for you.
You don't know you're carrying until you're triggered. I love that.
Yeah, you may not. You think you're good. You're like, nah, I dealt with that. That was like 10 years ago. What are you talking about, bro? What did you say to me? Right? Like, people think they're good, but they're not.
Through all of that, it sounds like you've cultivated a lot of vulnerability with yourself. I think for most people, that's where any real transformation starts, where you can be vulnerable enough with yourself to allow yourself to, I guess, become self-aware of those barriers, those blocks, that trauma, acknowledge it, and then work through it. How have you cultivated that vulnerability?
Well, I prefer the word transparency, to be honest with you, just because I do my absolute best to just be 100% at this point who I am, offline, online. I catch a lot of stuff for it. I'll be real. I'll catch it from my family, old friends. Like, they just don't get it. They're like, "What are you doing?" Well, it's freeing, for one, but for me, I think more than cultivating vulnerability, what I did was cultivate the courage to feel, which is something that I was always avoiding, right? Which is being vulnerable. In order to face off with your emotions, with maybe the less desirable parts of yourself, you have to be conscious. You have to be able to feel. So I carved out a lot of time for self-care and soul care. Like, and when a lot of women, we think about self-care as the nails, the hair, the lashes, whatever it is. And I found out that that's just not what it was. That's not what I needed. Like, a bubble bath was great, and I am big into fitness. That's a great outlet too. But all that is still kind of a busyness avoidance. What I needed to do is actually just sit down and face off with the emotions. Feel angry. feel sad, grieve, just uh, tell myself everything that I did to hurt myself, and then tell myself everything that I learned, and then tell myself that I forgave myself. Inner child work, like literally sitting there in your stuff, allowing the emotions to move through you, not in victim mode, but in more of a taking on radical responsibility for how I was feeling mode, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's super powerful too, and I love the contrast between that girl who was having these panic attacks, these outbursts, who wasn't quite fitting into
Yeah.
into her family, into now like allowing yourself to feel through all of that. That's fucking amazing.
It's not comfortable. It's super uncomfortable. I still don't like it, but I do it because each time I kind of cycle through deep emotion and I allow, because my father's got a terminal illness. I was supposed to get married. That was a really hard hit. But what I realized is by doing the work, I'm equipped to take these hits. And now I know that the only way out is through. And what I used to do is try to run from the pain, right? And it just will chase you down and maul you. It'll just maul you. So instead, like with a storm, the quickest way to get through a storm is to just pass right through it. It goes this way, you go this way. So that's kind of the way I view emotions now. I used to allow emotions to just completely rule me, take me over, which was another reason why I like to numb, because I couldn't be too emotional. And now, rather than identifying with the emotion, I just realized that I'm this guy, everything else is the weather, and I allow it to just do its thing to pass. Witness it, right? Observe, zoom out, and have compassion and think, well, interesting.
I,
Sadness is this.
I love the way you articulate. It's like storytelling.
I used to teach first grade, so I can I can be interesting, I'm sure.
One thing you touched on that I feel is super important, especially in this digital era, social media age, is copping a lot of heat for being authentically you and people not understanding you. How do you deal with that?
It's harder for me, I think, with family because, well, not right now because I've like faced it, but I realized what was hard for me with family was that I was still feeling like I needed them to accept and validate me.
Yeah.
Like I had kind of gotten over everybody else. I'm like, okay, I love and accept myself. If you don't, eh. But like a part of me just really still felt like I needed that from, my stepmom and my dad, and it ain't happening. They don't think the way I think. We're in different planes, and what I a big shift for me that's helped a lot is understanding the difference between love and acceptance, or love and validation. Right? They love me. I know they do. I love them, but they may not always accept my choices or ever validate them. And I have to just give myself permission to be okay with that. And then when it comes to showing up online and other people, I think that the benefit for me and for others outweighs the hit or the slack or whatever comes your way, because like I said to you, it is freeing. Taking off the masks and being yourself is literally the most peaceful, happy, joyous way to live life. You don't feel suffocated by your masks. You don't feel inauthentic or out of integrity. So you feel good about yourself. Like that's real confidence when you can feel like I'm being me, like 100%. Um, so it really helps when the hit comes because you actually, because you feel in integrity and in alignment with who you're here to be. It's like it doesn't actually shake you. It's like, well, it's okay. You don't really get me, but that's clearly your projection or whatever. And then on the flip side, where I find it to be even more powerful is, especially with my clients that I get to talk to or the people that DM me, the empowerment that it gives people to be authentically themselves. Like it's just like a little window of permission that says, "Whoa, like she's not scared to show up like that. Oh, maybe if I can just show just a little bit more of me like this, it's a little. Maybe it is safe to be seen. Maybe, right?"
Yeah.
But I would recommend starting in a safe space. I didn't just blast myself online at first. I didn't. That's dangerous. I started in a safe space with people like Morgan, right? We
Yeah.
talked about Morgan, great guy. What's the name of his podcast? If you guys haven't listened to that yet, it's stellar. What was their title?
I can't remember what it was. We only did part one with him because his story is a long
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Morgan James. But safe space like that with other people who can hold space for you and not have judgment, not make you feel guilt or shame about the choices or decisions that you've made, and just let you be you, like with the masks off, and just kind of like be held by these people. Um, that's where to start, right? With people who will hold a safe space for you to be you, like a small community online or in a coaching group or even with a one-on-one coach. Start practicing in a safe space. And then once you start building up your confidence and your self-love and really feeling good about being who you are, then I think it's easier to have the courage to put yourself out there and, feed yourself to the wolves, so to speak.
A few questions before we wrap up, buddy. I want to be respectful of your time. Knowing everything that you've been through so far, all the work you've done to improve yourself, get yourself to the point you're at now, what would you say the quality of your life is like now?
I am happier than I've ever been. I've kind of said it a few times to some friends recently, but I'm like, if I were to die tomorrow, which I don't want to, but like, I feel like I've made amends with me. Like I'm at peace with who I am. I feel like I show up, like I said, authentically, but most importantly, like I've been living on mission, on purpose, and being spirit led. So I feel like quality wise, like how does it get better? Because I just feel like I'm blessed. I feel blessed up, man. I don't know. That's not to say everything's perfect, right? But I feel like I've learned how to see the value in the struggle. I've learned how to see struggle as an opportunity, as failure as feedback. So, I've learned how to flow with life instead of force. So I'm not in resistance to life anymore, which really has alleviated a lot of suffering. It doesn't mean things aren't perfect and that there's not hardships and that there are days where, storms roll through and I'm like, screw this, I'm out. Like I'm still human. I'm still human. I don't have to bypass this human experience. I think that I've cultivated the tools and equip myself very well to continue to evolve and to live a very fruitful life.
That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
cool. And I'm happy for you. Genuinely happy for you.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. What have you added to your life or removed from it to improve the quality of it?
Well, like I think what I've added probably the most is fellowship with my higher power. I'm like in constant, it's like pilgrimage. I used to only pray at night and now I'm always checking in. I say that my business is spirit led. Like God's the CEO of my business. So I really, and surrender. Oh my gosh. Like that's my power move. I used to be such a control freak. So now after losing someone so abruptly, it kind of just slammed me into this understanding, like be present. You don't have control over Jack. So let go and be grateful. Right. So I think some of the daily doses of what I've added in the past just year even are gratitude, presence, surrender, and prayer. And I meditate too, but like those are big. Those are like all day, every day.
Awesome.
And letting go, I mean, I've let go of a lot. I mean, I've let go of lots of limiting beliefs, lots of toxic habits, thought patterns, people, places. Like I've switched it up a lot.
Cool. What are you most grateful for right now?
I've had the ability to spend a lot of quality time with my family. So I don't know if I'm most grateful for time or my family, but just the ability to be present with my grandparents recently, my mom, my dad. I used to take it for granted, and being like fully present to it now, I'm just like, I'm really grateful for the time to be able to do that.
I've been forced to realize that with my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important. It's important.
I guess to wrap up, what services do you offer? And if you're comfortable sharing, what's your vision for yourself and your business? I'm interested to know.
Yeah. So I am a personal coach right now. I do host group coaching sometimes depending on the time of year. But I'm a personal coach, so I coach around life, business, and leadership. And I help people with anything from working through their childhood traumas, relationships, personal, like overcoming their personal limiting beliefs, any healing that they need to do, obviously. And then even influencers, coaches, and leaders. I'm also dual certified in leadership coaching for high performance. So that's actually was always kind of my niche, right? Like I was already on that path. I coach and train hundreds of educators in North Texas. And I love that side of things too. Like I love Gerard Adams says leaders create leaders. I love creating leaders. So I work with coaches too, but even anybody in business startups. So it just, I think people are like, well, what's your niche? I'm like, I don't have one. I work with humans. I meet them where they're at and I help them to get to their next level, to, create fulfillment and the success that they desire, whatever that looks like for them. Because really, we know that our outer world is a direct reflection of what's going on inside us. So I help people really, identify those roadblocks, remove them, and get an action plan and execute that. So it's fun. It's fun.
I think anyone would be lucky to have you as their coach. You seem like a very good leader.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
In terms of your vision, is there an end goal for you?
There's no end goal. I mean, I don't have like an end goal. I also speak, so I didn't mention that, but I speak quite a bit. So I would like to continue that. This year's been really robust in the speaking realm. In fact, I've done more speaking than I have coaching. To bring it full circle, I guess, for your end game, I would love to. I'm like a deep down, I'm a humanitarian. So philanthropy, work with battered women who are in drug rehabilitation. I want to create some sort of probably non-for-profit with young women who are similar to me, maybe college girls, and kind of start to like maybe groom them, for lack of better terms, to coach them up, to mentor them so that they can go out in the community and be hands-on and help those who are less fortunate than them. But I definitely in the next 5 years want to host some retreats. I want to partner with other coaches, host some retreats. I've recently just started offering my services to help coaches who don't have, my background's education. I have a master's in education and I write curriculum for over 50 schools in addition to all this other stuff I do. Jeez. And I've recently started outsourcing that service to coaches who don't necessarily, maybe they're writers or maybe they're, multimillionaire or whatever, who had a great product or service, but they're not coaches, right? So helping them take that information and synthesize it and create modules that are comprehensible for people with like introspective questioning and just courses, online courses. So I've been kind of dabbling with that recently. So I don't know where that's going to go, but it's new. And we'll see. But retreats, partnering with coaches, speaking, coaching, you name it, anything to serve. Mm-hmm.
I think anything's possible for you, especially the way that you can like articulate what you're thinking, the way that you storytell. You have a really energetic, is the best way I could put it, energetic presence. Like very positive vibes.
Oh, you're all the way across the globe, man. Wait till you're with me. It's like whoosh. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the one thing I'll add to that is like I used to dim that. I was afraid of being too much. And I know that a lot of times people don't feel like they're good enough, but there are also people out there that feel like they're too much. Like, do not dim yourself if you're listening. Like that energy you have, people need it. So you got to bring it.
Yes, queen. All right. To wrap up, just want to acknowledge you for taking time to do this. Like I said, 12 hours apart, but most of all from turning everything that you've been through, that pain, turning it to purpose, now helping people all over the world. I love it. And I'm super grateful that you did this.
Very grateful for you too. Yeah, that's all I got. I've got a lot of gratitude in here, man. I'm shocked. Like you're a warrior. You're up at like 6 a.m. doing this. It's insane. If we were on the flip side and I was the 6 a.m., we'd be in trouble. Listen, I haven't meditated yet. I'm going to need another hour. Well, I hope you have a blessed day. I really appreciate your time, and I hope this serves your people. And they'll come check me out. My handles, I'm sure you'll share, but it's just my name, Ashton Cantou. So anybody, feel free to reach out if any of this resonates with you, or if you want to connect, if you need support. I'm your girl.
You're amazing, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah. Sending love. Bye.